Okay, now, continuing on with the history of video games, we are going to talk about narrative adventure games. Hey, it's teaching time. Okay, narrative adventure games. This is the huge monster genre that drove pretty much all those computers. Commodore 64, IBM, Apple II, Atari, everybody was playing adventure games, okay? And hopefully you're going to see why and then what happened. Okay, so narrative adventure games. They were the driving technology behind the mouse. The mouse came to be used in games because of adventure games. The first voice acting and dialogue in a game came from adventure games. First full motion video, first pre-rendered cutscenes, the first orchestral soundtracks, the first 3D graphics for showing characters and such. It all happened in adventure games. This is the thing driving the industry. So that's why we're talking about adventure games. So just to give you a quick idea of what an adventure game is, I'm going to talk about laundry. I had to do laundry on Sunday, my own laundry, and that's a pretty simple task. Okay, fine. So I take the laundry, I put it in the laundry hamper that I have, and I bring it over to the washer. And I go to put it in, but the washer is already filled with other clothes that are all wet. And I'm like, oh, fine. Okay, so I have to take them out of there and put them in the dryer. Open up the dryer, and it's all filled with kids' clothes that are all dry. I'm like, oh, man, now I got to get rid of these kids' clothes in order to get the wet clothes into the dryer. So then I'm like, okay, I got to go get something. I don't know if you've tried to carry little kid clothes, okay, because I have a 4-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and their underwear is like very small, and their socks are like very small, and their t-shirts are like very small. So you can't like just grab it like adult clothes and like carry it. So I'm like, I got to get something to carry this. So then I go downstairs, and I go looking for a laundry basket. Apparently we don't own one. This is news to me, but we don't own a laundry basket. So I'm like, man, what am I going to do? So my kid just had a birthday recently, and there was like a big birthday bag, gift bag. And so I was like, that looks about the size of the laundry. So I grab it. I empty all the things out of the dryer into this kid's birthday bag. And I go and I put that in the living room. Then I take all the wet things and I put them in the dryer. And then I take my things and put them in the washing machine, start the dryer, start the washing machine. And I finally achieved my goal of doing my laundry. Okay? And you're like, wow, that was a boring story. But the whole point is that you're trying to do one thing, but you end up having to do all these other things just to make that one thing happen. That's adventure games. Okay? That's adventure games. And it's, to use the formal term for it, when we talk about kinds of fun, it is chaining. Chaining is the kind of fun that you experience in adventure games. Okay? It's first I do this, then I do that. Oh, wait a minute. I can't do that yet. I got to do this other thing. I got to do this other thing. I got to do this other thing. So that's what they do in the adventure games. Okay? So what are key features of adventure games? They are narrative-based. I can't think of a single adventure game that doesn't have a story or isn't like focused on the story. Lots of games have story. These ones are very focused on the story. It's a distinctive feature of this field. They are puzzle-oriented, and so there are puzzles along the way. It's not obvious as to what to do, right? Especially in my case of, I need a laundry basket. There is no laundry basket, okay? So you're in the game, and you're like, I need a key. There is no key. But to use an example from Monkey Island, you can grab a rubber chicken, and you can grab a pulley, and you can put those two things together in order to create a zip line in order to go across a stream. Okay, and you're like, what the heck? So it's that improvisational side. It's like thinking in more lateral terms because the obvious thing is not there, so you're trying to find something that will fit the bill. That is very common in this thing. The pacing of these games is very slow and methodical and thinking-based. Usually, you have all the time in the world in which to make a choice. Okay, so you have an inventory maybe, and you're like, okay, I'm going to try the screwdriver. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, I'm going to try the balloon. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, I'll try the weasel. Okay, that didn't work. You can make as many attempts as you want. It doesn't penalize you in any way. When I say pacing slow, especially compared to the platformers we looked at last week, those things are action-based and things are coming at you very quickly. In this case, it's usually scene by scene. So you go into a new scene, maybe there's some talking, and then you make some decisions. Maybe you talk to some people, some dialogue options or something. You'll see examples in a second. So it's much slower. Turn-based, usually, although there are sometimes games that have some real-time elements within them where the whole game is real-time, but generally they are turn-based. You can take your time to decide. I say third-person perspective. There are some that are first-person perspective. Myst being a great example of a first-person perspective one. But generally speaking, in the adventure games that are not text adventure games, you can see your character, your person. And whether that's a guy or an alien or whatever, like you can see your person and you somehow control them throughout the world. And there's single player. I cannot think of an example of a multiplayer adventure game. So there you go. Those are the key features. Now, for the formal elements, so analyzing them in general, not every single game is exactly this, but in general, this is the formal elements. Players, one character, single player. The objectives, it's usually solve the mystery or achieve the goal. So achieve the goal could be, I'm trapped in a house and I'm trying to get out. That's the goal. Solve the mystery is, so-and-so got murdered. Why is that? A game deja vu. You wake up, you're covered in blood, there's a dead body on the ground. Go. And so it's like, wow, what happened? Okay, that's what you're trying to solve. The mechanics pretty much always involve a verb and a noun entry. So when we look at the text adventures, you'll see the person is typing in, put balloon on table or something like that. When we get to the graphical ones, then you'll see them clicking a balloon and then clicking the table to essentially do that same verb noun, which is put on table. Or you would say talk dwarf if you're typing it in, or if you're clicking, you click through to the talk button and then you click on the dwarf and then it does the same thing. So verb and noun entry. The mechanics are usually using the right object at the right moment. So you play a little bit of game, you kind of explore around, then you get stuck in some way. I was just playing Space Quest 5 on Sunday, and I couldn't get through to a certain area. There were guards there saying, "Sir, you don't have the proper security clearance to get into this area." And then I went and I did some other things, and I became a captain of a ship, and then they would let me walk through. Okay, so that is the using an object at the right moment. In that case, it was my status as captain. You usually pick up items and put them into your inventory. So usually they give you a variety of items. Usually every single one of them is used for something. They generally don't give you garbage that you pick up and carry around and it has no use. Generally, some games have done that. So basically it creates a rule. If you can pick it up, do it, because you're going to need it at some point in the game. And finally, a mechanic is opening and closing of options. So, for instance, talking with somebody in the game might open up other options in the game later on. Talking to someone or killing someone in the game might close options in the story later on. Okay, so that idea of multiple paths through the game that open up, or multiple paths closing off because of a choice. And finally, the rules are kind of pick up everything and exploration. There's a lot of exploration, walking around, talking to people in these games. Resources, usually an inventory of objects or conversations with NPCs. So, for instance, hey, I want to get through the guards. Guards say, you can't get through here unless you have permission from the captain. So what do? You walk over, you talk to the captain, hey, I need to get in there. The captain says, yes, you can go. And just by having that dialogue option, then you go back to the guards and they say, hey, you can't go through here. And they're like, oh, the captain says I can. And they're like, oh, okay. And then you go through. Okay, so that doesn't use your inventory in the sense of like you can see a piece of dialogue in your inventory, right? That'd be silly. But it is exactly the same thing of essentially putting an item into your inventory. The conflict, pretty much the conflict revolves around solving puzzles. There isn't fighting, shooting, racing, like there's just none of that. It's usually just solve some kind of puzzle. The boundaries, the game is bound to what I call explored rooms. A room is a scene of some kind. It could scroll. It doesn't have to be like a room in a house or in a building. A room could be a whole outdoor area. You can wander around. It could be multiple screens. But it's basically like the desert. And you can wander around in the desert, and there's like 6 or 7 screens or something, but it's basically one area. And those areas are what open and close in order to give you access to new parts of the game. So those are the bounds. And the outcome is you either die, in the case of all the Sierra games, there's a way to die, or you win, and if you win, there's maybe multiple kinds of endings depending on what you chose, what you picked up along the way. And in the case of the Sierra games, there's a score of some kind. So to give you an idea, so maybe you win the game, but you have 300 out of 500 points. That's an indication of like, wow, there's like a bunch of things I missed in this thing. You'll see the scores things kind of fades away. People don't really care for it that much. Okay, so I took all the adventure games ever made in history and boiled it down to these 20. So this class is only 2 hours instead of 400 hours. Okay, you could thank me later. I break them down into these 4 types or subgenres. There is the text adventure, which started this whole thing off, then the graphical text adventure, then the point and click, and then the modern adventure game, and I'll talk about that. Now, in general, women love adventure games. Why?
Well, probably because most of the games early on were all fighting games and arcade games, and maybe they wanted something that they could like experience
Without fighting?
Yeah, like without fighting people.
Yeah. Erica. Okay, so it doesn't require the same kind of dedication. You can pick it up and put it down. Was that a hand or no? Kind of a hand, kind of a stretch? Okay.
I don't have my thought fully completed, so
Anybody else? Why do women like these kinds of games in general? Okay, puzzle games, adventure games, women love those. Some of the other games, generally, women don't like them so much. Yeah.
it's the certain part of the brain, right? That I don't know what part of the brain it is, but women respond more to like strategic, not strategic. I don't know. See, this is what I'm saying. I don't really completely know, but I know.
Okay, I think you're saying it utilizes a different part of the brain?
Yeah, it does.
You'll stick with that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Utilize different part of the brain. A lot of the time in the adventure game, you progress by what? Talking. You progress by talking. That is very unmale. I don't know how many men you know, or if you are a man, but generally, that's not how we typically like to solve problems, is just through talking. And so getting to what Ben said, this idea of showing prominence, how strong you are, how great you are, or something through direct conflict is generally how men are. That's why you see generally men, I don't know, playing in the basketball team or whatever. Look how fast I am and how far I can shoot. Like those are ways of like showing off. Like these kind of confrontational things are generally not what women are. They're like, yeah, whatever. It's not that important. But to men, it's like everything in the world. Okay, so the adventure game doesn't have any of this kind of conflict. It has the other ways of resolving conflict through helping someone, through a dialogue option. And so, there's a different way of kind of showing your expertise or superiority. So we talked about this when we were talking about platforms. Colossal Cave Adventure is the first known work of interactive fiction, or what I would call a narrative adventure game. And the first text adventure game, and it was at a school on a giant mainframe, and like nobody could play it at home. It had a 2-word text parser, so you could type in, pick up, tree, talk, owl, like that kind of stuff. That's how you would play the game. People loved it. People were staying in the computer lab all the time and playing this thing because it was the greatest thing known to man. How do you sell a game without screenshots? There is no screen. What are the screenshots? They're just text on the screen. How do you sell that? And the answer is with models. Okay? And that's how you sell every game all the time. You just sell the game with models. Here's an example of the map that goes to Colossal Adventure if you were to map it out. And then, as I told you before, later they made a remake that did have a few graphics to go along with it to kind of help people out because people generally don't like just reading. Then a friend of mine, Scott Adams, he took that idea of like, hey, maybe we could make an adventure game on home computers. And that was a huge challenge, a huge technical hurdle to achieve that, but he was able to achieve that. And so 1978, he had published the first text adventure game. And then from 79 to 86, he created more games in the series under the company Adventureland. And by 1983, he had 40 people working for him. 40 people, all working on these text adventure games. Because this was big business. This is what everybody was using their computers for. And by 1986, unfortunately, they went bankrupt. And why did they go bankrupt? Yeah, nobody wanted to play text adventures anymore because they couldn't keep up on the graphics side. So it wasn't so much the gameplay that people didn't like, but given the option between screen of text and screen of some graphics with text, if not all graphics, people chose that. This game, Zork, was the home version of one of these mainframe adventure games. And they had a huge problem of, we got this big giant game, we can't get it onto the small memory of these computers like the Commodore 64 or Apple II computer. So they decided, let's split it into 3 titles. So they made 3 games out of it, Zork 1, Zork 2, and Zork 3. And there's a screenshot of what Zork looks like. So Infocom became like the company, the big brand name in text adventure games. And one of the really famous ones was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Has anybody seen that movie, read the book? Yes? Show your geek cred. You don't have enough geek cred. Yes, Erica, thank you. You've watched the movie? The books are hilarious. And the books are different from the movie, which are different from the radio broadcast, which are different from the video game. They're completely inconsistent with each other, which is hilarious. Anyway, so they actually worked with Douglas Adams, the guy who wrote the book that was really popular at this time. And they actually changed the book in order to fit the video game. And so when you play the video game, you get like different results. And so if you go to a wiki about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and you're like trying to follow the timeline, it'll say, well, this happened in the book, then this happened in the radio program, then this happened in the computer game, and then this happened in the book. And like they kind of like piece it together. It's kind of funny. Anyway, it's very well written and it's very funny, and a lot of people really enjoy it. And I would say it's still enjoyable today, even though it doesn't have any graphics or anything. But if you like reading, like a book, well, this is like essentially an interactive book, and it's kind of fun. So Infocom was doing that, and they just decided, you know what, this fancy graphics thing with what Sierra's doing, like that's not going to work. They're going to double down on the writing. The writing is the best thing they can do. And so they would have ads at this time. We stick our graphics where the sun don't shine, okay? Like the most powerful GPU in the world is between your ears, right? You can imagine better things, better graphics than what we could ever put on a screen. So they doubled down and focused on that. And so here's just a smattering of some of their games. They have a lot of titles. They had a lot of people working for them. They were the Bungie of their time. They were Activision of their time. Like everybody was buying their stuff. And they went bankrupt in 1989. But those last 2 titles there, Sherlock and Journey, at the very bottom, yeah, you can kind of read that, they were made by this guy, Bob Bates. He worked at Infocom, and he worked on the Infocom engine, and when Infocom went down, he went and started Legend Entertainment, and basically kind of taking what Infocom was doing, but trying to bring it into a modern era. And so Infocom was like, no graphics at all, and Bob Bates is like, oh, we can have some graphics, can't we? Like, what would that look like? And so he went and started doing that. And you're going to learn more about Bob in second year, so remember him for a whole year. Okay, and then I'll tell you more about Bob. We'll talk a little bit more about Bob later, too. Okay, so remember Sierra? They started out on the Apple II computer. And Mystery House, Roberta Williams and Ken Williams, they decided to make video games. And, they were totally indie. So here is a very quick video of some of those early games in the 80s that they made. So you can see the third-person perspective. The screen does not scroll. You get to the edge, it loads a new screen. The text entry of the verb and the noun. This is King's Quest II. How can you tell it's King's Quest II? You can't, because it's exactly the same graphics. Yep. You can use the cursor keys. We don't even have mice yet at this point. So use the cursor keys to drive them around. So here's King's Quest III, still using text entry. There may or may not be a mouse at this point. So just where you're standing is important. Like if you said open cabinet, but you weren't close to the cabinet, it would say, oh, you're not close enough. And you actually have to move up to it and then open it. This is Space Quest, 1986. So Space Quest is a humorous game parroting Star Trek, a little bit of Star Wars, mostly Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, those kinds of things. And so there's an example, throw water. So he throws water on this creature and is able to overcome it. The Black Cauldron was actually a Disney film that came out at that time, and Sierra got the license to make a movie version of the game. Sorry, game of the movie. This is Leisure Suit Larry. Now, Leisure Suit Larry is an adventure game about a guy who's trying to get laid, and he's never able to do it. So, it's a weird thing where it's a game kind of about sex, but there's no actual sex in it, and that's how it was still able to be sold in, without rating systems or any of that kind of stuff. So that's just a quick example. So Sierra was a really big deal. Roberta Williams created the King's Quest series. If you remember, that was for the PC Junior. IBM came to them and said, hey, we could really use something that has some good music and some good graphics. Would you make something for us? She's like, okay. And so she makes King's Quest. King's Quest goes on to have 8 sequels. Space Quest comes out, kind of making fun of Star Trek using the King's Quest engine. It goes on to have 6 sequels. Police Quest comes along, and they're like, hey, we should take this whole thing and kind of put in some police procedure and real sort of case files that you can investigate. So Police Quest comes out. It has 6 sequels, and then later they switched into SWAT, which becomes first-person shooters. Then they decided, hey, let's take these King's Quest thing and add role-playing elements to it. And so the role-playing elements created Heroes Quest, or what becomes Quest for Glory, 5 sequels to that. Leisure Suit Larry, one I just described, and it has 6 sequels. So overall, Sierra, in their time span of about 20 years, released 200 games. Okay, this is a level of productivity that even EA can't match. 200 games. So Sierra is a really big deal when it comes to adventure games. They basically dominate the market of adventure games. Okay, so this is Roberta Williams. Roberta Williams is at the center of all of this. And so I thought it was important from a historical note to show, look, there's women who really can dominate the industry. And so Roberta Williams is one of them. I guess it helped that her husband was a programmer. He didn't start the company for her. He didn't start the company and she started working with him. He started the company because she was making the games. Does that make sense? That's why he started the company, because she was making games, and eventually he quit his job in order to go full-time making games with his wife. So she released 22 games over 20 years, and most of her games were top sellers. Some of the examples are Mixed Up Mother Goose, making something more for kids. The Colonel's Bequest, that was something a little older, kind of Agatha Christie, murder mystery kind of style. And here's a quote from her. "I appreciate the sentiment that I am a popular woman in computer gaming circles, but I prefer being thought of as a computer game designer rather than a woman computer game designer. I don't put myself into gender mode when designing a game." So we'll come back to Roberta Williams in a little bit. So that's Sierra. And the next game that's important is Deja Vu. And it originally comes out on the Mac in 1985. And this is the DOS one. The Mac one is black and white. So I figured it'd be nice and give you at least color graphics. So if you look at this, it doesn't look anything like the King's Quest thing. Like it's got like little windows. Did it start? Yeah, it started. It doesn't have any sound. I don't know why it doesn't have any sound, but it doesn't. So you have little desktop windows. You have a little text area where you can read, so a throwback to those text adventure games. But you can resize the windows, move them around. You can drag and drop things. That's the big thing that they added, was because the Macintosh came with a mouse, it was the first computer to come with a mouse and have a GUI interface. Look, he was able to just grab those things straight from the screen and drop them in the inventory. Holy cow, that's incredible. Look, they're resizing the windows. You're able to move things around in your inventory. Big, big innovation. They ported this thing to to Nintendo, the NES, 8-bit. They ported it to Amiga, and they also recently have ported it to the PS4 and Xbox One in 2017. So if you'd like to play Deja Vu, there's the 8-bit adventure anthology that you can get, and you can play this on your Xbox. Okay, so that was a big moment in 1985, because now we need to talk about these guys, LucasArts. LucasArts was founded by, anyone take a guess? Yeah. George Lucas. Yes, George Lucas. Okay, so you started it in 1982. Now, let me tell you about George's problem. George Lucas had a huge problem. Okay, you may have seen the tweet, hashtag first world problems. George Lucas has a first world problem. Star Wars is making too much money. It's making too much money. Poor George, he can't get through his house because he has to get through all the money. Okay, so what is he going to do? Well, he could pay it all to the tax man, and when you're at that top end of the income bracket, 50% of your money goes to the government. 50%. So if you made $100 million, $50 million goes to the government. George is like, that sucks. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that money and I'm going to blow it making video games, because that will make me more money in the future, right? If I can like get this thing jump started, and sure, I'm just going to lose money for 2 years, 5 years, whatever. I don't care, because I'm George Lucas. I have tons of money. So he decides to start LucasArts as a way to save money on taxes, okay? And so, to ensure that it's its own legit company, it's not just riding the coattails of Star Wars, which is something he's very concerned about, he said, you are not allowed to use any of the Star Wars licenses. Now, he said that for two reasons that are quite good. The first one was he wanted original ideas, okay? So, you're making games, come up with something original. You can't just make Star Wars game after Star Wars game after Star Wars game, the way EA makes football games, okay? The second thing is the Star Wars license is worth a ton of money. Okay? He was able to license the name Star Wars to Atari for $1 million in 1982. So why would you have these knuckleheads that you just hired that have never made a game before and give them one of the world's most valuable IPs to make games on? That doesn't make any sense at all. I'm going to sell it to Atari, who knows what they're doing. They pay me $1 million. I take that $1 million, pay these junior people to go make me some original games, right? And if they totally fail, I'm cool. It doesn't matter, because I had $1 million to blow anyway, right? So George is a really smart business guy. I don't know about his writing and movie directing and stuff, but there's one thing that's undeniable about George Lucas. He's a great businessman. Okay. They ended up making adventure games. Like, what else are you going to make? It's the most popular genre. It's like if you started making games today, you're either going to make a first-person shooter or maybe a sports game. Like, those are the things that people are buying. So they're like, okay, well, we got this money. We got to make some stuff. So let's make some stuff. So actually, to be technical, their very, very, very first game was like a space game that you fly around and you shoot aliens and stuff. And it's not Star Wars. It's just a space game where you fly around and shoot aliens. But every other game that you see on here is an adventure game, okay? And George's adventure game, they ended up with 63 unique games that they made at LucasArts. So Sierra is the big, huge 10,000-pound gorilla in the jungle. And then the smaller but still mighty one is LucasArts. And that pretty much sums up the adventure game industry. Okay, so there's this guy who started day one, and his name is Ron Gilbert. And Ron Gilbert, he had some ideas on how adventure games should be made. So he saw what Sierra was doing, and he was like, I don't think there should be dying in these games. I don't think there should be typing. I think the screen should scroll instead of just, get to the edge and a new screen opens up. I think there should be cutscenes so you can see like the story progressing, maybe like a third party, or maybe the bad guy or something. You can see what's going on there and then come back to what you're doing. Okay. He also felt that the text should be over top the speaker's head. You saw in those early Sierra ones where there's just a big fat window that would just like appear and like give you the text, and then you click and it would go away. So he felt that that was important. So he created, along with some other people, but mainly he created what's called the Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion, or in the short form is SCUM. Okay, he created the SCUM engine, and you'll never forget that word, SCUM. And here is Maniac Mansion. Now, Maniac Mansion did some really innovative things. The first thing is you got to pick your characters. Okay, when you play Space Quest, who do you play as? Roger Wilco. That's it. That's your only choice. This one, you get to play as 3 of the, I think, 7 kids. And the game has different solutions to the problems in the game based on the kids that you chose. You also get different endings based on the kids that you chose. So this thing has replayability, something that adventure games have pretty much failed to do since this time. The idea was to make a funny story based on horror films and B-movies of that time, kind of the teen horror film, that kind of genre. So they were like going to write something about that. Notice how the game makers are in the credits right up front. So it's telling you like who made this thing, who wrote this music. That is completely different from what Atari was doing. Atari was trying to hide who was making the games, remember? And that really upset the game developers. So here we are in Maniac Mansion. You can change characters. So you play along as one of the characters, and then you're like, oh, I'm kind of stuck. You can just switch to a different character and like explore different parts of the game, and maybe get access to different parts of the house. There's a famous writer, Orson Scott Card. He's a big science fiction writer, quite famous. They made a movie called Ender's Game based on his first book, and he wrote at that time. He praised it as a step toward computer games becoming a valid storytelling art. Okay, Maniac Mansion was so good that writers were like getting scared about. Is that a hand up? Yeah. Didn't what? In Maniac Mansion? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So it's in these adventure games at this time, they did have problems where you could basically get stuck for the rest of the game, and like all your save files up until that point are useless because you forgot to pick up the key at the very front of the house, and then you have to start the game all over again. Basically, we were really brutal to our players back then. Game developers were just really mean and didn't think through those kinds of things. Nowadays, we have usability testing, user experience. We have a lot more knowledge to build from, and so we don't allow that kind of stuff. So this came out around the same time as King's Quest. So look at the graphics. First of all, the characters are like way bigger. but you don't have to type anything anymore. All of the verbs are laid out there. You just click on the verb, and then his inventory is beneath with the key and the flashlight. So you click the verb, like give, key, and then you click on the other person. So you don't have any more typing, and this was a huge, big deal. Okay, so that is Maniac Mansion. Okay, Ron Gilbert then goes on to create Monkey Island. Look at this awesome box. I miss computer game boxes. I have hundreds of them in my home because they're my trophies. I love them all, and the game boxes were just beautiful back then. They put a lot of work into them. Okay, so The Secret of Monkey Island came out in 1990, so the year just after VGA graphics came out. And so this was, for me, one of the first VGA graphics games that I ever got to play. And there was another guy working at LucasArts, and his name is Tim Schafer, and he's also important. So Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer are both working at LucasArts. And just to give you an idea, it's kind of like if Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift got together and had a baby, that would be the most amazing baby on the planet, okay? That if they got together and had a video game, it would be this video game, okay? So you had basically two geniuses that created The Secret of Monkey Island. And so I am going to show you the amazing thing that is The Secret of Monkey Island. The music is already like way better. VGA graphics, 256 colors. And here is Guybrush Threepwood. And you see the text is now appearing in that character's color over their head. Makes it a lot clearer as to who's talking when. And these are cutscenes. These are timed cutscenes. Oh yeah. One of the old Pokemons, yep. So Guybrush here wants to be a pirate. So he tells them, okay, you want to be a pirate, go talk to them. And where are they? They're in the Scum Bar, because Scum is the name of the game engine, and that's hilarious. There are so many jokes packed into these games. So off we go. So now he goes to the bottom. We're changing scenes. Okay, part 1, the 3 trials of becoming a pirate. That was a disguised loading screen. And so here it's mouse driven, again, just like Maniac Mansion. Graphics are better. In this particular case, the guys are smaller, the characters are smaller, but it changes scene by scene as to how big they actually are. So here we are in the pirate bar. Okay, there's like a ton of talking to that pirate guy, so I'm just skipping ahead. Okay, so there's dialogue options that you're choosing, and then he's talking back to you. There's like 4.5 minutes of dialogue that I just skipped over. Adventure games usually have a lot of story, dialogue. So now here we are doing one of the first challenges, which is to try and get a drink. Oh, but first he's going to talk to the dog. So I think it was pretty hilarious, especially at the time, that you can have a full conversation with the dog. The dog is talking, you're choosing different woofs and arfs and stuff, and they're making fun of the whole genre in this one scene. Okay, so the cook just left the kitchen. So this is a real-time element of this adventure game. The cook just left the kitchen. So now we're able to close the door, get in here, and do some things. So we can look at this hunk of meat. Now he's going to pick up the hunk of meat. So now it just went into inventory. Then there's a pot. That pot becomes a helmet later on. So remember I talked, there's usually a lot of improvisation. So he needs a helmet, so he just puts his pot on his head so he can safely do things. And now he's put the meat in. He's created some stewed meat. And he can't pick up the fish because that seagull's in the way. So now, how do you know to keep doing that over and over and over again? You don't. Because it was the 80s and there's no internet and you have no idea what to do when you're playing this game. You just keep trying stuff. And maybe your friend has Monkey Island and maybe your friend figured that out and you exchange stories and that's how you played those games, okay? So a lot of these games, the challenge disappears as soon as you just go look it up on a wiki somewhere. And that's where the old guy complains about the good old days. Okay, so Ron Gilbert, he left LucasArts and went off to create adventure games for kids. He felt that that was a better, more worthy thing to do. And so in 1992, he founded Humongous Entertainment. And he just found that kids had a hard time playing, like a 5-year-old, for instance, had a really hard time playing Monkey Island. They couldn't do it because they couldn't read. Okay, so they were like, wow, we need to overcome that. So he created adventure games. CD-ROM had just recently come out, so you have basically unlimited space for not video, but for audio. And so they're able to record all the dialogue lines, and kids can play it. And they made a ton of really great games. And I now have very small children, and I bought this pack on Steam. I think it was $60. And I got all the games for Humongous Entertainment, and my kids play them today. They're 20-something years old, maybe even 30 years old, and my kids enjoy playing them still to this day. Yes?
I had the Jimmy Sam one.
Yes?
And the fish one.
Freddy the Fish.
Yeah.
Freddy the Fish. They're great games, aren't they?
They were really good.
They're so good. So it's great just to see somebody who's kind of top of the industry is like, I'm going to do something for families, okay? And it was great. So my kids are enjoying it to this day. So they sold over 15 million copies of these kids' games and had 400 awards of excellence. And the name Humongous Entertainment was suggested by that genius, Tim Schafer. Okay, we're going to talk more about Tim Schafer because he's important. But back to Roberta Williams and what she's doing over at Sierra. In 1990, so the same year that Monkey Island came out, Roberta Williams makes the most expensive game that's been made to date that has the best graphics and the most everything, like just a huge, big blockbuster thing, basically the Destiny 2 of the time. And she spent $1 million with 20 people over 14 months. Okay, you guys have started timelining games, and you're like, wow, it like takes a long time to make things. No matter how many people you have, it still takes a long time to make a game. 20 people working for 14 months. And they made the first VGA adventure game for Sierra, anyway. And here I'm going to give you a little snapshot of it. So here it's a total point-and-click interface. They got rid of all the text typing.
If you're going into town, I'll just wait for you here. I had a nasty run-in with a big dog once, and I feel much safer out here.
And nobody thought you needed to hire good voice actors. It was just so thrilling that you didn't have to read. They just got the programmers or the secretary or whatever just to record the audio.
Inside the barrel, Graham sees an old rotting fish.
So here they are going around picking up a fish.
Graham leans way down into the barrel and removes, phew, the smelly old fish.
And now they're going to go into the store.
May I help you, sir?
Nope, apparently not. So I think you kind of get the idea. This is King's Quest.
Bending down, Graham quickly retrieves the silver coin from
And
the street.
this is a watershed moment for adventure games because Sierra, the big company that's making all these adventure games, is now making these point-and-click VGA games, okay, copying the style from LucasArts. Okay, so
These pies cost 1 silver coin each.
here
I've
I'm
got 'em
using
right
that
here.
coin
Here
that
you
was
go.
found.
I hope you enjoy your custard pie.
Oh, I'm sure I will.
And so now he's leaving the store, and that's what that shop or inn or something kind of looks like. And now here's a puzzle that they're going to overcome the obstacle because they picked up the item. So we're going to use the fish on the bear, and he picks it up and he goes away, and that's how you do it. No fighting, no shooting. Throw the fish to the bear. Okay, lots of terrible voice acting. Here's the NES version. They made this thing for NES. So you go from 256 colors down to, I think it was 20 colors or 16 colors. So like this thing isn't even close. Like this is the town scene that you just saw with the coin and the fish barrel and stuff. I don't know why anybody would play this, but anyways, they did that. It was the music that sold it, yeah. Okay, so Sierra is now making these VGA games, and they decide to hire another woman, and Jane Jensen, and they say, we want to make something that's more adult, more, primetime TV, not adult as in nasty, but just, it's not for kids. It's just something a little more serious and stuff. And so this is a supernatural psycho thriller called Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. This is essentially your murder mystery novel, like a Stephen King novel that has been put into a video game. Deep story about a struggling novelist and a real-life murder mystery. So they took all the facts from a real-life murder and made that the main storyline to this game. This game had 2 sequels, and here we're going to show you just a little bit of how this one plays out. I don't know if I said it. I think this is 92 or 93 when this came out. We're real far from King's Quest at this point, right? Burning people alive and such. Here's some pre-rendered stuff. Okay, so this whole thing is a dream sequence that starts off the game, and then here's how the game begins. Just the tone, the mood, the palette are completely different from the King's Quest, right? Which was a lot brighter. This is...
I bet. Just a minute. It lives, I see. Do you want to speak with Lolita? I'm sorry, but Gabriel is allowed. Oh, I mean, he's out. Yeah, if he ever comes back, I'll tell him. You could do better. I know I don't know you, but you could do better. Good morning. The phone's been ringing off the hook all morning. Let me know when you want your messages.
Yeah.
Gee, you're lively. Did you have another night?
Okay, so that is kind of the dialogue part of going back and forth, right? So we got rid of all that reading. And here is going to go and start picking up some items and doing some things. Actually starting a dialogue.
Got a minute, Grace?
What's up?
So here we have a choice of dialogue
What can you
options,
tell me about
and this is
voodoo?
part of the murder mystery part.
I didn't know much of anything about it until you started researching it for your book. Now I know that it's active in the city.
So
There's that
highlighting
shop
the characters and
It can
giving a lot
clearly
more
be
dialogue
dangerous in the
options
wrong
allows
hands.
for a lot more possibility
You should be
space
careful
in this
investigating
game.
Do you know anything else
'Kay.
about voodoo?
I've told you all.
Hey, remember Bob Bates? Bob Bates, who was stuck at Infocom, and Infocom imploded because it refused to do graphics. Well, he's like, I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to take adventure games further. So he decides to make this game called Eric the Unready, which is a parody of fantasy role-playing type games. And he had a number of innovations at this time. So here's what Legendary Entertainment did. This is their intro sequence. Oh no, Eric lit up the table on fire. Look at what we had to suffer through for graphics. No photorealism then. Okay, this is copy protection. So now we have another little sequence where we have some play. Okay, so here he is in the farm, and Bob is like, yeah, you know what, we should put in some sound effects and some music, and let's have some graphics, but he really likes that whole text thing. And if you have good writers, text can be very compelling. There are still some text games that are coming out today. Around the World in 80 Days is a very popular text-based game on mobile phones. If you look that up, Around the World in 80 Days. So what he's done is that middle column is showing you the nouns that are available in this particular scene. So you don't have to guess. He's giving you things that you can try. And then all the verbs are over on the left. So it's a different way of doing it than what Sierra was doing. It's obviously a lower budget. You don't have to make so many graphics. You don't have to record audio and stuff. And you still get, you still get the text adventure kind of fun. Okay, so that's what was going on there. And then a big thing happened, and that is Myst. So if you remember from our history of platforms, Myst came out and just dominated in the PC market. So you had these incredible pre-rendered graphics, didn't look anything like what people were drawing. I'm having a hard time talking here when you guys are talking. Okay, it's teaching time. Okay, so it's on the test. Myst is on the test. So Robin and Rand, his brother, in 1993 come out with Myst. They put it on CD-ROM, and they have these incredible 3D rendered graphics, and they sell at least 6 million copies in those first couple of years. So this thing was huge. Big puzzle game. They've made 6 sequels, and they recently raised $2.8 million on Kickstarter to do a re-release of these things on a 20th anniversary. So same thing that you're doing in King's Quest, same thing you were doing in Zork. Going around, picking up things, exploring, puzzles sometimes involve numbers or switches or something like that. Here, you got this thing right. That's going to open up a new area. So unlocking previously locked things. What's great about this game versus The Seventh Guest is that when you clicked, you kind of immediately saw something, whereas The Seventh Guest had these long kind of video sequences that you had to go through. Look at those amazing graphics. It blew everybody away. Okay, so that's Myst. Okay, next in 1994, we have this company called Access Software. And Access Software, they were really trying to push the graphics, the technical graphics side of things. And trying to go, because what are video gamers always trying to make? Movies. They're always trying to make movies. Still can't tell you why they always want to make movies, but they always want to make movies. So look at this thing. it looks like a movie poster. Okay, the front of it looks like a movie poster. Second thing, featuring the voice of James Earl Jones, the guy who played Darth Vader in Star Wars. Okay, so look, we have big Hollywood names attached to our game. And then on the back, it lists out some of the actors that you probably don't know, and I don't really know. But anyways, they were actors kind of known at the time. So they were like, wow, what can we do with this? They created this Tex Murphy franchise. This particular one happens to be the third one in the series. Couple of innovations is they had fully interactive texture mapped 3D environments. Okay, so basically those are the kind of graphics you see today. They were the first ones to do that in an adventure game. They spent $2 million over 4 years. So up until this point, the biggest blockbuster game was King's Quest V at $1 million, and these guys, a few years later, doubled that. They spent $2 million making this thing. And they're still making games in this series. They're up at like 8 games in this series, and these just came out. The Tesla Effect came out in 2014, and The Poisoned Pond came out in 2019, so they're still going strong. So what makes these things so special? So here is Tex Murphy. So look at this 3D environment that you can walk around in.
This pure mountain
Contrast
spring
that to
water is
Myst,
indispensable.
right? Where you just
Literally.
like click and
I'm out
then
of
you get a
paper
different
cups.
picture. This one you can really move smoothly around. Basically taking what Doom and Quake have done and bringing that
The
into
office was
adventure
actually
games.
a dance studio before I moved in, and Latin dancing is a Murphy family tradition. My gun. I love it so much!
Professional voice actor, still not a thing.
Old trusty sidearm. Been with me since the beginning. You want some of this? Huh? Bam, bam! Hey, bam, bam, bam! Bam! Bam, bam! Bam! And you! Hey, Sonny, can you help me out? My girlfriend threw my gun out of the window. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just pick it up and, hey, don't point that thing up here. That's not a toy, you know. Oh my.
Okay, so
No
the
matter
thing
how
that's
bad things
hard to
got, I always had my
convey
gun.
at this time in
No, I've
2019
lost that too.
is that like
I have a
93,
feeling
94,
this is gonna be one of
95,
those days.
everybody was doing full motion video graphics, okay? Hiring actors, filming actors, and putting them in video games. Now we use 3D render technologies.
The dusty
we don't
credenza
have
I've got
actors in
serves
that
only
sense.
one
We
purpose,
do
and
motion
that's to keep the
capture
dust off
with
the
actors,
floor.
but not this full motion video thing where we just record actors in the studio. But
Great,
everybody
great
was doing
Grandpa
this at
Murphy
this
made
time,
it
and
through
Tex
the
Murphy
Depression
was
by teaching
one of the companies that
cha-cha
was doing
lessons
it
to
well.
rich older women.
Okay, with
He made thousands
access
before the
software.
authorities
So
found out he had no formal training.
this is, this was the next evolution of adventure games. So Roberta Williams saw that and over at Sierra, and she's like, wow, our dream can finally come true of making movies. So she decides, I'm going to make this game, Phantasmagoria, which is going to be an adult horror game. And this is in 1995. So Sierra built a movie studio into their office in order to shoot this thing. That's crazy ludicrous. Like, rather than going down to LA or whatever and shooting things, they're like, we'll just build it in. Why? Because full motion video is the future. This is what all the games. Why would we hire all these artists? We don't need artists. We need cameras and actors and makeup people. That's what we need. Okay? Aren't you glad you're not going in the industry at this time? Okay? Because you guys would not have jobs. Right? They're like Ken Williams started firing people, laying off artists because the future is video. So they started doing that. They wrote a script for this thing. Now, just to give you an idea, movie scripts are about 1 page per minute. So a lot of movies are 90 minutes, so that means they're 90 pages. Some movies are 120 minutes, so they're 120 pages. Now, some that have a lot of dialogue might go up to 200 pages. The script to this game was 700 pages. 700 pages, okay? So that is like 5.5 hour movie or something. No, yes, Zach?
An hour equals 6 pages. Yeah, so yeah, probably about 5 hours.
Yeah. So why do you have to do that? Because in a movie, the story only progresses one way, right? You have the beginning, the middle, the end. There's no changes. In a video game, you have to script, record, all the variations of you get to the scene and you do have the axe. You get to the scene, you don't have the axe. You talk to this person, you get to the scene, you hadn't talked to that person before. Like there's like so many things they have to add because it's a video game. And so that's why this thing was a huge undertaking. And I don't actually have a budget thing here, which makes me sad that I can't tell you how expensive it was, but it was crazy expensive. When we had cartridges for the video games, when we had floppy disks, you would get maybe 5, 6 disks that would come with a computer game. Okay. Then the CD-ROM came out, and it was like 1. It was just 1 because like the thing's almost unlimited space. It went from 1 megabyte on a disk to 680 megabytes on a CD-ROM. And so what do they do? What does Roberta Williams do? 7 CDs. We're right back to having like 7 discs that come in the box, and they would start bragging about that. And so here is a scene from Phantasmagoria. This whole late 90s, mid to late 90s thing of having video in a video game, this is the best it had been done. Now notice the pose. It's almost your T-pose in 3D modeling, right? Because as game developers, we don't know like where are you going to go or where are you coming from. So every scene, the actor has to be in this really static pose to start that scene off. So now she's going to try and go down under this carpet. See, she goes back to the T-pose. And now we do the next request, and then now she can act out that part. Fair enough. Now, this is still King's Quest in terms of like how it's played. It's just the graphics are a lot different. So here we are changing scenes. The scenes don't scroll. We're going to the fireplace. We're going to pick up the poker. Okay. Okay. Do you remember this guy?
Yes.
Who is he?
He is the guy that we first learned about last week.
Yes.
And I forget his name.
Yes, Jordan Mechner. And Jordan Mechner wants to make video games like movies. That's right. Good memory. Okay, so he took some time off from making Prince of Persia, and then he decided to get back into making video games. So what does he do? He creates another game that blows everybody away. Okay, I don't know why there's just certain people in this world that have extra magic fairy dust on them, that they're just super creative and can do amazing things. So Jordan Mechner's like, maybe I'll make a video game, and he makes Prince of Persia, and everybody goes nuts for it. And he's like, I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go make TV and stuff. So he works in TV for a bit. He's like, I feel like making a video game. Goes back to making a video game, makes an incredible adventure game that totally changes everything. Okay, so he wanted to make this game, The Last Express. So the whole thing takes place on a train, and the train ride, starting from, I forget, I think it's Paris, that goes to somewhere in the Orient, Turkey or something like that. So the game takes place on this whole train ride, and it takes place in real time. Not real time for like, because I think it's like 5 or 6 day trip. But the game plays out in real time, meaning that the whole game will have an ending within 3 hours, regardless of what you do. So if you solve the murder and everything, then you get the happy ending. If you waste too much time and you don't solve the murder, then you don't. And what's really cool is that the people on the train move around realistically. They have AI, they have certain things they want to do, they go for a sandwich and they're in a sandwich car, and this is unheard of in adventure games. It's still unheard of in adventure games, that the people have like real lives and move around. And that's some of the magic that I'm trying to bring to my role-playing game of Archmage Rises. Sorry for the shameless plug. He spent $5 million making this game, okay? So the previous biggie was 1, then the next one was 2, and he's like, screw you, I'm gonna spend $5 million. I don't even know how he got that kind of money, but he spent $5 million building this game, and the really sad news is that it came out too late. He took 4 years to make it, and despite the fact that they spent $5 million on this thing, the publisher, Broderbund, they were at the end of their life. They had laid off all of their marketing team. They had quit anyway. So by the time the game was ready to be released, there's like one person left in the studio to do marketing. And so it just didn't make the splash that it should have. So it's a very important game from a historical perspective. Critics loved it. Didn't sell very well, which is kind of sad. So here is a quick snapshot of The Last Express.
In the world
and
of
you can
adventure
get it
titles,
on
The Last
iPad.
Express is a sort of rite of passage, especially as it puts a spin on the usual tropes of the genre by packing them into a mystery thriller that plays out in real time. It should be no surprise that such a concept sprang from the mind of Prince of Persia creator Jordan Mechner, and despite its relative age, it remains a shining example of how deeply gameplay and storytelling can be intertwined. You play as Robert Cath, a young doctor thrown into an intriguing plot of murder and mystery on the Orient Express. Once on board, the train comes to life. Its passengers move about in real time, and you'll need to work out just why Tyler Whitney decided to bring his longtime friend Kath on board. A lot can happen in the...
Anybody have any, I'm interrupting for a second, anybody have an idea why is the animation so terrible? Like, why does it jump like that? I don't know what you know about animation. I'm just curious. Okay, because they're only showing the keyframe animations, the keyframes. Okay, so the way that traditional animation is done is you have the expensive senior artist. They draw the first frame of the movement. Say it's a walk cycle. Well, walk cycle is a bad example. Say it's the beginning of a jump. Okay, so they do the first thing, and then they do the last frame to say, I want them to start from here and end here. Who does the in-between? All the juniors. All the juniors come in, they do all the in-between work and put it all in. And it's really easy to do the first and the last. It takes tons of time in order to do what's called the tweens, the in-between frames. And so they were able to save money by just skipping all the in-between frames. And so that's why all you see is keyframes. You just see the keyframes. Okay, so I'll let you watch the rest of this. It's only another minute.
Space of a few hours of gameplay, and you won't want to miss any of it. Which is unfortunate, as each decision you make will spiral out and affect how the game plays out. Miss something critical, and you'll need to backtrack to work out what happened, or rather, is going to happen. This is easy enough thanks to the ability to rewind and fast forward time, replaying events if you believe it will help. Alternatively, multiple game slots are available as well. Despite .emu's hand in re-releasing the title last year, the iOS version still relies on the basic hotspot system, albeit with handy highlights that you can turn on or off, that can make navigation a chore. While it may not take too long to mentally map out most of the game's locations, a genuine map indicating your orientation and relative location would have been extremely helpful, especially given the available screen space on the iPad version. Nevertheless, exploring the Orient Express, talking to its many passengers and staff, and becoming entangled in the plots weaved within makes for a fascinating playthrough that will keep you coming back for more. The stylized, rotoscoped artwork retains its appeal despite the game's relative age, making it hard to see any downside to picking up this adventuring classic. This has been Andrew with AppSpy.
In 1999, Sierra with Gabriel Knight 3 now, because Gabriel Knight 1 was such a big success, Gabriel Knight 3, they're like, hey, what if we got rid of all these pesky actors and this stupid film idea and we went with 3D animation? Like, what if we did that? And so that's what they tried here. And it sucked ass. That's the short version. Nobody wanted to play this.
Tourist signs. Wouldn't want anybody getting lost.
I still don't know why they don't hire good voice actors, but whatever. Okay, so even at the time, this really sucked. We saw this in '99 and went, I don't want to play that. It's so bad. Okay. 99.
Ooh, that yellow tile certainly makes its presence felt.
Yeah, there was way better stuff out. You are correct. So yeah, camera controls, the graphics are really terrible. Sierra's on its last legs. Basically, Ken and Roberta Williams left Sierra 1 year after this. Like, this is the end of Sierra.
Chi è colpevole di questo sacrilegio?
Remember this handsome hunk of a man? Look at this hottie. Okay, this is Tim Schafer, and he's important. So Tim is still working at LucasArts, right? He didn't leave like Ron Gilbert did to go make kids games. He's still working away, and he decides, I think I'm going to make a 3D adventure game, right? I'm going to make 3D graphics. LucasArts never got into the full motion video stuff. They always did regular cell 2D animation, and then he came out with this thing, the 3D animation. And this Grim Fandango is a very famous game. This is the game that made 3D adventure games possible.
Set in the land of the dead. It turns out the Aztecs were right. Everybody in the afterlife looks like those cute little Mexican folk art skeletons. You play as Manny Calavera, the Grim Reaper. Actually, he's one of several Reapers, you see, because in this world, death is more of a travel agent. In the original Aztec mythology, the souls of the recently departed face a perilous 4-year journey through limbo before they reach what's called the ninth underworld. On foot, the journey's dangerous. There's a high chance of being eaten by demons or smashed to bits by supernatural forces. And so Manny's job is to upgrade these souls to a better travel package. If you'd lived a virtuous life, you might get a golden ticket on the number 9 express train, which zips you straight to heaven in just 4 minutes. Manny's big problem is that he just keeps getting deadbeat clients who have to make that 4-year journey on foot, whereas his work rival Domino is getting all of the gold ticket clients. Manny starts to suspect that something fishy is going on, and then bang, so starts a story of love, betrayal, and tiny skeleton birds with human faces. The characters that Manny finds himself up against are really despicable people. These were obviously gangsters in life, and so they remain gangsters in death. And so why bother moving on? They know that whatever awaits them in the next life is almost certainly going to be worse than where they are now. So some of them have figured out, well, you know what, I might as well just stay in limbo indefinitely. By exploiting the souls of the innocent, these guys can elevate themselves into positions of power or money or influence. And yeah, of course, money still exists when you're dead. Better to rule in hell
made 3D
than
a
to
success.
serve in
People
heaven,
are like,
right?
hey, you can actually do this. It sold less than 100,000 copies in North America.
I thought Grim Fandango was just this goofy
that was a
story
huge
about
disappointment,
skeleton travel.
but it was a critical success. Everybody loved this
He's an
game, just nobody bought it and played it.
too, right? So he's working as a Grim
So
Reaper.
Tim,
he's not on his own.
he leaves LucasArts and goes off and founds this company called Double Fine. And Double Fine, they are stuck in this weird time in the late 90s, early 2000s of like, nobody's playing adventure games anymore. What do we do? So he came out with these 2 games, Psychonauts and Brutal Legend, which are 2005 for Psychonauts, 2009 for Brutal Legend, and they're hybrid adventure games. They're adventure games that have combat and real-time elements to them. Brutal Legend even has like real-time strategy aspect to it near the end to defeat the final monster. It's really weird. So it's basically the idea of evolve or die, because the adventure games are basically dying out. And then they die. Why do you think they died? Yeah, but more specifically, there's a genre that has taken over. The first-person shooter, that's right. Okay, so I told you at the beginning of today, adventure games was the thing pushing the tech forward. getting people to buy new equipment, getting people to start using a mouse, getting a sound card. The first-person shooter became the thing that's pushing everything forward. So basically, all the men left and started shooting things, and I guess there wasn't enough ladies around in order to keep the adventure game genre going. And it basically fizzled out, and there's no more adventure games. So what happened? Well, over in Europe, they didn't get the memo, and so there were two games that came out in this dark ages period of adventure games. The first is this game called The Longest Journey. And they took the cues from Grim Fandango. This is in 2000.
Sure thing. It says Sweet 16. My dad gave it
and
to me. I think it was the only birthday of mine he remembered.
The lead character is April Ryan, and she displays a rare strength and maturity for women in games, using her intelligence and wit rather than good looks and sexuality to overcome adversity as she underwent a journey across parallel worlds that mirrored her own personal growth, with some of the best writing yet seen in years, and dealing with really heavy subjects. Here she is talking about her childhood and about a dad that never really did anything kind to her. That's like really different territory from pretty much all video games, but even within these narrative-driven adventure games, just to wrestle with the child-parent relationship, past abuse, just heavier topics, right? More thorny topics. And so they had much, much better graphics than what you saw in the Gabriel Knight only a year later.
Never have to see him again. No, that doesn't sound right. I've made a choice not to see him again. Ever.
She just added something in inventory. Now she's leaving. So still an adventure game. Now you can scroll around. It's not all locked to one screen. And so here's the beginning of a puzzle. And so this is kind of like Myst. Like the Myst-style puzzles that everybody was enjoying. This is something like that. Okay, so we'll move on from there. The next one is Siberia. Siberia, I called it a European game. It was actually made in Montreal, but through a French publisher. So it came out in 2002, so 2 years later, for Windows, PS2, and Xbox. So it's a little weird for an adventure game to show up on the consoles, but they did do that. And they had 2 sequels to this game, so it was popular enough. It sold 500,000 units, which is way better than Grim Fandango, which only did 100,000 units. It was made in Montreal by 35 people on a budget of about $2 million. And it just wowed everybody. Detailed graphics, Art Nouveau mixed with steampunk, so it had a very unique art style to it. And Kate Walker is a smart female lead. Now, why would that be important? Why are these games being cast with smart female leads? Because it's women and girls that are playing it, so it makes sense. Like, what else are you going to do? Okay, and this game came out for Nintendo DS, PS3, Xbox 360. You can get it on iOS, probably for iPad, and you can get a Nintendo Switch, which is like, what? I was a little surprised at that myself. Okay, so here is a slice of Siberia, the thing that kept adventure games alive. This game is 15 years old, and it looks pretty darn good, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I know games now are better, but not by much.
Hey, hi there. What are you doing? Can I see? No, too difficult. Momo's work very difficult. So, your name's Momo. I'm Kate.
So this is how the dialogue is done, and then I think I have an example of kind of more gameplay oriented here. Yeah, we're going to go outside. It is pretty slow, Ben. It is pretty slow. But that's the style, right? Like, Sonic is fast platforming. Mario is not too fast. It's not slow. But this is designed to be this kind of way, to have the, you know, the story sink in and the theme and stuff. Oh, good, they added a run. Anyway, okay, so that is that. Now, there's a company in San Francisco, I think it's in the Bay Area, pretty sure it's in the Bay Area, called Telltale Games. And Telltale Games love adventure games. So even though everybody abandoned the market and nobody's making adventure games anymore except for those two that I just showed you, but like we've gone from 200 games in 20 years to like 2 games in 10 years, Telltale comes along and they get this thing called Sam & Max. Sam & Max was originally created at LucasArts, but LucasArts got out of the adventure game business and they just made Star Wars games. They just went off and made Star Wars games. So the one thing that George Lucas didn't want to do at the beginning is how they ended up. They just keep making Star Wars games. So Telltale gets the rights to Sam & Max in 2006, and they do a couple of new things. They move it into full 3D. They simplify out all the puzzles. Okay, so the puzzles up until this point were like difficult, hard, brain-numbing kind of puzzles, like I don't know to use a rubber chicken with a pulley in order to get across a zip line. So they just simplify all that out. And they move the game to be episodal. So you have this idea of games as a service. So maybe they give you the first episode for free, and then each episode after that is $10. So if you're in for all 6, they get $60, which is pretty good. But if you just, I'll just try this thing out, and maybe I'll buy the second episode, then it's only $10. And so they are quite successful with this. Then nobody really cared about these games. So like they were going along and there were like some people that played it and stuff, but like nobody would talk about it and stuff. And then something big happened. Okay? It's like an atom bomb got dropped and everything changed. And that game is The Walking Dead. Does anybody watch The Walking Dead? Yeah. Okay, now we're talking about things you know about. Okay, so Telltale, they licensed all kinds of stuff. They licensed Jurassic Park. They licensed Back to the Future. They licensed some other things. Sam & Max was something that they licensed. So they were already licensing things, as they just happened upon The Walking Dead. This is before the TV show like really blew up and became a big deal. So they licensed this thing, and they decided to do a bunch of things. So in 2012, they released the first episode of the first season of The Walking Dead. It's based on The Walking Dead's comic, not based on the TV show, although they do have some of the TV show characters come in for a little bit of the game. This is the innovations that they added. Episodal and seasonal based. They release one episode every 6 to 8 weeks, basically enough time to make it. So remember we talked in the last class about that early part of like the gameplay engine and like just getting something going, concept art and whatever. You need that first part, and that could take a really long time. That could take a year. Okay, so you have that first part, but then once you kind of know what you're doing, you could start to like bang things out, and that's what these guys did. So they would make that first episode. They have a script for the rest of them, but they make that first episode, get it out there, use that money to make the next episode. So they're on like basically an 8-week cycle, kind of like television. So they just get that new episode out. Cause and effect. So up until this moment, every adventure game played exactly the same, except for maybe Maniac Mansion, where you had that choice at the beginning of which kids you took into the mansion, because that would change some of the puzzles and some of the ending. But in general, everybody got the same experience in Myst and in King's Quest and whatever. In Walking Dead, every episode had 5 key moments when you had a choice. And if you made that choice, it forever changed the game path for you. So one example would be zombies are coming, there's 2 people that are trapped, you click the person to save, and the other one gets eaten by the zombies. For the rest of the game, that person's dead, and the one you saved is alive, and you're able to have dialogue with them and that sort of thing. Okay, that's one example. After you finish the episode, they show you kind of like these are the choice points that happened and what you chose, and then they show you world stats of what most people chose. So you would see 13% of people chose what you chose in this particular case, or 78% of people chose what you chose. And so the branching narrative, people are like, wow, this is so cool. Like it innovated this dead genre of game that nobody cared about playing. What else do we have? Okay, they sold 50 million copies of The Walking Dead. Okay, so we went from Grim Fandango, sold 100,000 copies, and it was like everybody thought it was amazing, to 50 million episodes that they sold. That is huge, and it came out on all the consoles. So PS3 and Xbox 360. You can get The Walking Dead. You can get it on PS4, Xbox One. I don't know if you can get it on Switch right now, but anyways, it came out for the consoles. So, and it's on mobile too. Yeah. So here is an example of The Walking Dead. They did add real-time elements to it.
So did he do
Quick time events, basically.
They caught the fucker red-handed, stabbing his wife, cutting her up as the boys came through the door. He sits in my car screaming bloody murder that it wasn't him. I think he actually believed it himself. It goes to show, people will up and go mad when they believe their life is
The player
over.
can control the camera because it's all
I
3D.
got another good one for you. This one's a little bit less depressing and a bit more hilarious, if I do say so. This other time...
Is this more your style, Ben? Okay. Okay. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same people. Telltale. So they introduced these real-time things. So I don't know if you noticed in the car scene when the dialogue popped up, like there was a choice of like watch out and like a couple other choices. You only had like a moment to choose something. Otherwise the game just continues on. Yes, Eric. You're ruining my story.
Shit.
They saved adventure games. That's the point we're at here.
Fuck.
Sorry for the language. I can't do anything about that.
Hey! Hey, officer! Are you all right? I'm still cuffed back here. Why the hell did he have his gun out?
So they give you highlight points, so you don't even have to guess where to click. That makes it easier to play. Okay, I can't show you any more of this. Got a few more things to say. Remember this hottie? Tim Schafer, the most handsome man in adventure gaming. Okay, so he's doing his thing at Double Fine, and he wants to make an adventure game. Okay, like the old adventure games. He wants to do it because he used to work on those, and those were cool. And so he goes and launches a Kickstarter and calls it Double Fine Adventure. And this Kickstarter raises $3.45 million to fund this video game. Now, video games cost more than $3.5 million, but the fact that he was able to get $3.5 million like up front, because he couldn't get a publisher. He couldn't get anyone to fund his game. And so what else was he going to do? So he went to the people and he got the money. Now, if you remember what you learned in your previous class about timelines, it's really hard to estimate how long is it going to take to make this game, right? I mean, I told you, like, use 1 unit of 1 week, blah, blah, blah. But what if you didn't even have those things? It'd be, like, crazy hard, okay? So they go to Kickstarter, and they say, hey, this is what we're going to build. We're going to make this game. Give us your money. So they get their money. And Unfortunately, Tim got it wrong, and he ran out of money. What are you going to do? What do you do? So he decided to split the game into two pieces, a part 1 and a part 2. And his big idea was, I'll put out part 1, and we'll start getting sales from part 1 to pay for finishing the game, and then we can get out part 2 to everybody. And so he was able to make good on his promise. So wasn't that nice of him? That was really nice. And that game is called Broken Age. And so here's a tiny little clip of Broken Age.
What a good boy.
I don't really know if it's 3D. It's hard to tell if it's just like painted 2D or if it's actually 3D.
Hey, easy, computer. Oh, quit being so shy. I used to
When?
change your diaper.
2014 it came out. So it is a classic adventure game in the style of LucasArts and everything. And that's what people were finding. That's what they were looking for, was to get like that same feel. Okay. And I'm going to skip that and go to... Now, this game came out of nowhere. This was an indie game. It was a guy in England who was like, you know what? I want to make a full motion video game again. Okay, so he's like, I'm going to make this full motion video game called Her Story. It's a crime fiction game with non-linear storytelling. And you're given this computer, this like 1995 computer, and it has a whole bunch of video clips. And you have to figure out what happened in this murder. And you do that by watching these interviews. And so the whole production budget was the guy programming and this actress. That's it. That's the whole game. And this thing took off. A lot of Gamma Sutra articles, people talking about it at GDC. Everybody's in love with this thing. It got Game of the Year awards. This thing beat out like Halos and stuff for Game of the Year awards.
You think it's murder? Clearly it's murder.
Okay, so it's a whole lot of that. Last but not least is David Cage. David Cage is an important guy. He's a French guy. And what do game developers always want to make? Movies. So David Cage is like, how can we make games more like movies? And so he created a bunch of games, Heavy Rain, Beyond, Two Souls, and Detroit, with very few puzzles. Very few puzzles. You basically just click and walk around and talk. But what he did do was really great graphics. So this is Heavy Rain.
Are you prepared to suffer to save your son? You have 5 minutes.
What's going on, Nathan?
I see things.
This is
at
Two
night.
Souls.
You look upset.
And that's
Terrifying thing.
Ellen Page,
Brian
the
Clayton from
actress.
CIA. The agency wants
Another
you to
Hollywood
join
actor,
their
Willem Dafoe.
military school program at Camp Perry.
Once Pandora's box is open, it can never be closed again.
More and more androids show
And this is
signs of
Detroit,
deviancy.
Become Human.
There are millions in circulation. If they become unstable, the consequences will be disastrous.
You can count on me, Amanda.
I think that came out last year, right? Yeah. You're in Detroit. You're trying to become human. Okay. So David Cage has like his own way of doing the adventure games. It's very cinematic and doesn't give you like a lot to do per se, but it's very well done. And people, you either love it or you hate it. You say this is a game or this isn't a game. And finally, we have re-releases of these games. So they're re-releasing them, and you can now get updated versions of Monkey Island and Grim Fandango. And remember Ron Gilbert? Remember this awesome guy from LucasArts? He's still making adventure games, and he just came out with Thimbleweed Park. And it's just a classic kind of LucasArts game. And finally, you have the option to make your own adventure games using Twine. Twine is a free website tool that you can go to, and you can get, you can make branching narrative games. And that's kind of the future of adventure games now, is that everybody can kind of crowdsource this thing. So that is class. I will post the slides, and we will see you next week with a test on adventure games, the history of adventure games. Okay, thanks.